At 6:05 p.m. First, we have the flag salute. Well, we have everybody here. So, Mr. Jordan, would you lead us in the flag salute?
I will. Ready to begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Announcement of action taken in closed session. We had one item, an employee performance review. The result of that review was a satisfactory. The adoption of the agenda. Do we have a motion to move the agenda with pulling out? When we do that, we need to pull out item number 2 on the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll motion.
A motion by Mrs. Pope. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Mrs. Anderson. All right, well, let's see. Yeah, we're going to roll call it. So we have a motion, we have a second for adoption of the agenda. Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson, aye. Mrs. Pope?
Aye.
Mrs. Pope, aye. Mr. Jabali?
Aye.
Mr. Jabali, aye. Mr. Hunt?
They have to turn on their mute.
Aye.
Mr. Hunt, aye. Chair votes aye. That's unanimous, 5-0. That brings us to organization reports. CUTA, Mrs. Mason.
She is on the line, I believe.
Mrs.
Hi.
Mason, are you on the line? Oh, there
Yeah,
you
I
are.
am.
Okay.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, happy first month of vacation, right? We're all on vacation. I want to just report that TCA is very thankful to participate in all of the planning meetings for the next school year, knowing that when we all work together, we can come up with the best plan for our district. Hopefully, plan 1 being that everybody's back to school as usual, knowing that there probably will be modifications. I'm just happy to participate in those, keeping the best interests of the students, staff, and family in mind when we make these plans. And that's it.
Thank you very much. That brings us to Mrs. Huggins, CSEA.
Greetings.
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 I echo what Vanessa had to say in regards to CSEA wanting to be a part of the conversations about how our new normal is going to look. We know that that can impact not only the teachers and the students, but also support staff. And so we're definitely wanting to be involved in those planning sessions to make sure that our people are represented, but also that we can be as adaptable as possible to the needs of the district. So we want to be involved in that. Also, about a week and a half ago, we submitted a request. Let me go back farther. In the fall, we submitted our initial proposals to the district for negotiations. And those are called sunshine proposals for a reason, because they have a sunshine date. And we last negotiated in January, and so since we haven't been able to negotiate since January, we now need to be able to have a sunset date on our initial proposals for 1920. So what we're needing to do is get together for negotiations. We realize that would be probably via Zoom in order to be able to complete out the 1920 year and then be able to move forward for the 2021. So that's our request at this point, is just for us to be able to move forward, to be able to do that.
So I'm seeing Mr. Grimes back there. We'll work with him to get a date on the books as soon as we can.
I've sent several dates or Caesar about a week ago.
Okay.
And if you didn't get those for some reason, let us know. We'll get them again.
Well, I know that some of the stuff that ended up at the field office for the CSEA, they can't go to the field office. So he's having to do everything on his little phone because they won't let him back. They won't let anybody back into the field offices to work.
Wow.
So all of their negotiation stuff, everything that they did prior to March, got locked down.
So So would it be helpful?
I'll reach back out to him
Okay.
tomorrow, see if I get him on the phone.
I appreciate that.
He had emailed me asking for some dates, and I gave him a couple of weeks, and we might find some dates. And that was over a week ago.
Okay, I just didn't see that email, and I spoke with him tonight and asking about this, and he said, yes, please go ahead, so,
I'll follow up with him tomorrow.
okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Facilities update, Craig Deason.
Good evening. Got a couple of items to update you on tonight. Our full-day kindergarten program, our drawings are going to DSA on June 19th, so we're getting pretty close. We're wrapping it up. We're having our contractor look over the plans so that he can get his input, and we'll be ready to submit those on June 19th. I met with the landscape architect today over at the site, so they're working on figuring out where the valve boxes are, the main water lines, when they start digging around down in there, and how they're gonna re-landscape that area down there after they put the
Where's
buildings
that
in.
at?
What's that?
Oh, where they're gonna put the pre-kindergarten, or the full day kindergarten.
Yeah, so the kindergarten rooms are going, basically they're going behind the kindergarten playground. So they'll be down in that area that drops down behind where it comes over close to Brown Otter, not Brown Otter, whatever
I
it's-
forgot.
the street they're on.
That's
Redwater.
What street they're on.
Redwater.
No.
Redwater, not Redwater.
I don't know why we can't think of the
If
street. that
if you're looking at
school
the
is on.
campus, if you're looking face onto the campus, you see kindergarten, and then there's an open space that has like a round little old amphitheater. It's going right there.
Okay.
And it's gonna stay up at the height of the current playground, so it's gonna they're gonna move a lot of dirt and build some retaining walls, and basically the kids from the new buildings are gonna be able to walk straight through that fence onto the playground, so it's gonna give them some nice, easy access for
The
that.
fence off of Alberta or in the back?
No, it's the fence that surrounds the playground area that goes back into the nature center area, which is where the buildings are gonna go. So we tried to get all that squared away. And then tonight, before you have a piggyback purchase order, if approved, Enviroplex is a modular construction company, and they are the ones that are going to be providing the modular buildings. They're not portable buildings, they're modular, built on site, and they're gonna look really nice, and they're gonna match the same look that the current buildings have. So that's gonna be good. And with our CTE applications, we are expecting to hear back from them by the end of June. We did get some 15-day letters that CFW is helping respond to with some questions that they had. And it's looking pretty good for us. I think it would be best if we got one or two. And with the bond sale, we should be able to fund our portion of those projects. So we should be hearing in late June about that. The new school, we did have architect interviews yesterday, and we had 3 of our 7 firms interviewed, and it was a great experience. We did pick an architect, but they don't know yet, so we will bring that their contract to you in August. Okay, for that. And then as far as land acquisitions go, we are working on CDE approval for that site. And after we get CDE approval, we will purchase the property, and we do plan on bringing you a land purchase agreement at the October board meeting is the timeline for that. So that's about it as far as the current projects we have. I did want to run through just a few interesting development activities. So in the last month, Gibson Crossing is across Alberta Road from Walmart. It's that new area there that's kind of behind the storage area and Tractor Supply. They pulled 13 permits, which means they're getting ready to put their models in, which means that's going to start moving there. Westbrook is in the northern portion of our district, actually within the stovepipe. So after you get up to the top, where West Park and the current other Roseville school districts are. If you go around the corner to the right and up the stovepipe, there's a section in there, and they pulled some permits. They pulled 8 permits, so they're going to be putting in models over there in that area. And then JMC pulled another 16 permits, and that's just in the last month. So it just tells you that construction isn't slowing down. The what's that?
Sierra Vista is JMC, right?
JMC is in Sierra Vista, yeah. So construction is kind of still moving along. Just to let you know, in this 1920 school year, JMC's pulled 234 permits for $1.8 million worth of developer fees this year, 1920 school year.
Do you really think those kids are gonna end up coming here with the bus ride and everything? Or are they just gonna sneak on over to Roseville?
Once
Yes,
we get them
they
here,
will.
Once we get them here, you know they want to stay. So I talk to families because they all have my cards at the sales offices, and I talk to them, and
So you've had phone calls?
yeah,
Nice.
and I tell them how great we are.
Yeah.
Do we
Are they
still
sure?
have those packets?
We have new information that's up there, and then Craig and I have been up there multiple times talking with the realtor, the actual person talking about it. So yeah, so we're doing the best we can. Some will sneak over, but we're doing our best to show what we can. And Craig has done a great job of, the most recent one, sharing everything with her. She was a little, irate with Craig. Craig waited till the next day, came back with a very professional response. That evening, she sent another, I'm looking forward to being a part of the district. So to me,
Nice.
that was a win, because usually I'm like, we're never getting this one back, and he said, we did it.
What are we doing as far as buses? Are we gonna have enough buses for them?
We are going to have enough buses, and hopefully in August, I'm going to be bringing you some purchase contracts for some electric buses that are going to be a screaming deal. So I'm also working on putting in charging stations, and I've got a bid out for contractors to put in 12 charging stations in the maintenance yard. And I believe we have a possibility of getting 9 electric buses.
So that means we would be all electric.
No.
No.
We currently have 13 routes, and for every electric bus I get, I have to turn in a polluting bus for, because I'm getting a lot of money from the Air Resource Board to purchase these buses.
So we have an electric fleet, we still have a gas fleet, because we still have some that would be outside of our typical bounds of electric, so we don't want to send on a cold snowy day up to Colfax for sports or Bear River or whatever on a electric bus that they may not have charging stations, and then we're stuck.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
How many do we need built before we can start the school?
well, we need to have at least 120 students.
So where we are now, if you remember with the bond presentation, so we're entering, hopefully by the end of this month, we'll start with purchasing for planning, we'll purchase the property. So it is in the mix, and that timeline would be 3 to 5 years for completion and ready. But I went up there today, because I hadn't been up there in it seemed like a month, and there are people living across the street from where our school will be already. I mean, physically living. There was, one had a U-Haul.
Both sides.
Yes, one had a U-Haul, and the other had people,
Oh, wow, so this could happen fast.
Yes.
And I drove through actually today too, and I went through an area where, the homes are in process still, and every single one of them on the side says sold, sold, sold. And I passed 40 homes that were not complete yet that had sold signs in the windows. So
Nice.
it's pretty
Take a
amazing.
ride if you want
Yeah.
to. It's gonna be a sea of homes.
And then, so actually, my next topic here is I've been up into JMC, and if you go west, you'll be at the top end of the Lennar development. So the Lennar development is the one that if you go up Watt Avenue to the end, and you look across and a little bit to the right, you see roads that they're putting in, you'll see block walls that they're building. But if you go up to JMC and you go around the back, and there's a little roadblock there, and if you go around the roadblock,
We might have to take a field trip.
if you go around the roadblock there, you go a little further and there's earth movers, there's excavators, they're working on infrastructure, they've got paved roads back there, they've got sidewalks back there. And they actually are starting to have some pads showing up with, with the little electrical wires sticking up. So they're getting ready. They should be pulling permits pretty soon too. And that's 1,200 homes. And then across Baseline is another Lennar development that is an adult living community. It's going to be 1,250 homes, something like that. And they're the ones that had all the road graders out there. As you drove up Malerga, you could see them. Now they have excavators. They have like 30 excavators, giant excavators out there. And they're putting in water lines and sewer lines and.
We still get developer fees,
We
even though
get-
there's gonna.
Yeah,
get
no
commercial-
kids, but they'll have these.
It's less.
Less,
Yeah.
smaller amount.
We get commercial fees from adult communities,
We'll take it.
but we'll take it.
Thank you.
So that's really it, except then they're also, this is the big deal for this Lennar community. They're putting the water line across Baseline this weekend. So it's like a 16 or 18-inch water line that's gonna allow them to do their 1,250 home development, but it's also gonna allow, as they start to go down Baseline, it's gonna allow for Placid Vineyards to start taking off. So,
Do we have a sign up on the property, future Homa Center School?
We don't own it yet.
Well, yeah, we can't, we don't know yet. That's that question in October.
Okay.
Because
Yes.
we do have an architect on board, we do have a site plan, an initial site plan. You put the site plan on the big board and you stick it out there and face it this way to this development, that way to that development, and show them what's coming. So that's all
Just
I've got.
helps to get people psyched up about the new school.
Thank you.
I have a question. We discussed in April, maybe possibly mowing again or plowing property, big little ground property. Is that a possibility?
Can you repeat the question, because I think we gave you the mic here.
Yeah, the question was, can we look at plowing, disking the property next to Wilson Riles where one of our elementary schools is going to go? And that is a possibility. Let me look at it and look into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Any other questions for Craig?
Good job.
All right.
Thank you, Craig.
That brings us to reports, presentations, 2021 school year planning update. Is that you, Scott?
Start with me, and then Mr. Jordan's going to make his way up. And I just want to say, as Mike makes his way up there, I don't know, were you going to go there, Mike? Or you got that all right? Yeah. While Mike goes up, I just want to say that there's a lot of conversations about the coming school year. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's many guidelines out there. I just want to reiterate that no final decisions have been made. We're having a lot of conversations based on those guidelines of what it may or may not look like. And our philosophy has been, and I'm going to take this out of Mr. Wilson's book, or Trustee Wilson's, we need to be nimble and prepared for what we have, and so that's the course of action we're looking at. So we're spending a lot of our time this summer and even spring trying to figure out what scenarios, what could it look like, and be prepared rather than just waiting and trying to let it happen to us. So with that, I just want to reiterate that we do not have, there's no final decisions. We plan to come back if there is a situation that is unique, that's not a regular, everyone comes on back, we'll come back for sure with the board to say, here's what it is and have you guys approve that. We're not just going to implement it. We want your approval and understanding of it before such time that we, quote, implement. So with that, I will give it to Mike, but I'm not going to give you this so that Jeremy and Mr. Malad can hear you.
Just real quick though, from what I read today, they've opened up movie theaters and everything else. They just said go for it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of conditions on that. Right now they're saying go for it, but like 25% capacity, there's still restrictions with it. It
Right.
is open. And that's part of the plan Mike will share is we're looking if we have to open partially or with social distancing or whatever that may be, what could that plan? Because we still have almost 2 months. And if you go back 2 months from today, things have changed rapidly. So
Yeah.
we have 2 months. And I'm going to propose that we get together the third Wednesday in July. That still gives us 5 weeks. A lot is going to change in 5 weeks. So we're just trying to get our plans in order so when it comes, we can get it communicated and we can get it implemented. But if without that tactic, I feel like we'll be behind the 8 ball, for lack of a better word. Mr. Jordan, sorry.
Fantastic, thank you.
So
as Mr. Lair said, we are planning, looking at all different scenarios of what could happen. We're attending webinars, we're looking at all the guidance documents from CDE, from, CDC, all the different guidance documents coming out. The idea, again, just to reiterate what Mr. Lair said, is to come up with what we're calling the playbook, which we will present to you in July, when we're more closer to the school year, so that you can pick which option we're looking at, or which option we will go for. The three right now that we are looking at, the three different plans. Plan one is just come back full-time, just as a normal school year. So we would come back in regular classes, all activities, everything would just be as normal. Plan two would be looking at if there is some type of a social distancing order in place, where we would be coming back what we're calling the hybrid model. So with the elementary school, that would be a 40-60 model. You'd split the school in half. It'd be 2 days a week for half the school. So for example, Tuesday and Thursday they would come. The other kids would be doing distance learning during that time. The other half of the school would become Wednesday, Friday. The other groups would be doing social distancing. Monday would be for teachers to not only plan the distance learning part in their curriculum, but also to have online meetings with students, small group discussions with students, those kind of things to answer questions. The junior high would be on a 6-period day, so that they can split it equally between those two and lessen the class loads down. And the high school would be on their 8-period AB, but again, split it in half. So really, they'd only be in school 1 day a week with distance learning the rest of the days. Again, that's if we're in a scenario where we have to do that, where that's kind of a necessity to do the social distancing part of it. Then plan three is if, for whatever reason, the county or the state go back into a shelter in place, we want to make sure that we are ready to go with a true distance learning, virtual learning format, as organized as possible. Again, we're hoping we don't have to go into 2 and 3, but if we do, we want to make sure we're planned up and we're ready to go on the drop of a dime. We don't want to get caught flat-footed in case one of these scenarios happens again. We know and we also have a independent study option for our families as well. We sent out that survey about a month ago, and it's pretty much split 50-50. 50%, it's actually 47% want to come back full-time, regardless of social distancing. The rest are hesitant. Either they want social distancing or true independent study. In the comments section range from, look, we have people going through, they have medical conditions at home, they're going through chemotherapy things. We don't want to put our kids at risk. So we need an independent study option where our kids don't go to school anymore. To the other side was, let's just get them back. This is very difficult from a mental health perspective on my kids. Let's get them back in 5 days a week. So we want to make sure we have options for all those families. So regardless, we will have an independent study option available. Even if we're back full-time, K-12, an independent study option open so that those families who are not feeling comfortable sending their kids back, they still have an option to get their education. That is, and then obviously we'll also have home and hospital for those that really need it. We anticipate, especially in some of our populations of students that have IEPs, we have some pretty medically fragile kids. So our home and hospital numbers may go up a little bit. So we're planning for that as well. That is kind of the nutshell of what we are planning. Were there any questions?
I have one for you. I could see a fourth scenario just out of necessity. So let's say everything's cleared, everything's back to normal, sporting events are back up, and they say, go back to school. Especially if you have a kid in a risk group, you might just say no. So I almost think one very realistic scenario that I didn't hear would be where we're back full time, but due to kids in different risk groups, we would still need to provide them with the distance learning, even if everybody else is back. And you kind of mentioned it, but I didn't hear that as part of scenario 2 or scenario 3. So is there a scenario 4 where we come back full time, but due to the kids that are in risk groups, they have the option of distance learning?
So we have In that first option, we're all back. Actually, first and second option, we have a true independent study where they would use Edgenuity, which is an online program. The advantage to that is at secondary level, those are A through G compliant courses, which is fantastic. So they are still prepared to introduce the CSU system. We're calling it virtual learning, same basic thing as a distance learning option as well. We're exploring how that would work. Would we have enough FTE to do that? One of the things that we heard repeatedly in the parent survey was the distance learning as we're doing was not effective. That they needed more. And that's where Edgenuity is more of a self-contained program. But we are looking into that, yes.
So specifically to answer, so if we came back on Plan 1, which everyone back 5 days a week, typical, if a family wanted or felt because of medically fragile or whatever, we will have an opportunity for them to do either what you call independent study or distance learning. That option would be open, actually through each of those 3 phases, we would have that option open.
Yes.
So it would kind of be like, that's a 1A, 2A, 3A type of thing. It's concurrent of all of those.
Okay.
And then obviously we'll need guidance on things like athletics. Is CIF going to let a high school kid be on independent study and participate in sports and those kinds? We don't know yet. We'll have to find out.
And on the athletic topic, just because I know that's another hot one, so we are participating. The county had a few districts come together and say, hey, we want to look at this as a collective. So we were invited to participate in that. So I think tomorrow is the first meeting to start gearing up. So one of the things I think most, if not all educators know the value in extracurricular activities, that is, especially if we come back. So we're hopeful in that vein that if there is a way to safely have those things carry on, we will participate. So we're actively working with those groups to make sure we're not left behind by any means.
So you're meeting with whom?
So there was recently this week, I think the six largest districts in Sacramento County came together and said we're going to put a team together to start exploring that. And so they reached out to us and said, would you like to participate? So we're aware of what's going on and not hearing it after the fact.
So then, once these entities get together and they formulate a decision or a plan, do they have to submit that plan to CIF?
CIF, no. CIF has already said it's a local control issue.
That's what I thought.
So what my thinking might be is, because there's been rumors about, will the state weigh in, will the state CIF, what? So I believe that plan would then have to be shared with, I'm not sure who, but if we collectively want to do it and it follows the guidelines, I can't see a reason why we couldn't. So once something's documented, but it would be a safe return. I know there's been a couple other schools or districts where they've started like football conditioning, for example, and there's pretty strict protocols on when and how it's conducted. So that's what I'm believing this group would come up with.
So at this time, our athletics have not had any training or conditioning at this time?
Correct. Athletics, pretty widespread, at least in the county and I believe Placer County. I'm not sure about El Dorado County, but Mr. Hunt could probably weigh in on that. We're not practicing there. It's been silent or dormant and since we left March 13th. Not to say that kids are not running and lifting weights and practicing sprinting and throwing on their own, or maybe with their dad, but.
And then in regards to academics, so you're gonna have a plan, we'll meet again in July, and depending on CDC and the county, right, or Sacramento Health, Sacramento County.
Yeah, so we would look at the guidelines that are presented, try to come up, see where we are within that 5 to 6 week range from now, and have these options, see which option would best fit with where we want to go as a district and then even at large.
So to give you an example, what we're looking at for this document, we looked at the public health orders out of Sacramento County Department of Health, the Centers for Disease Control, their guidance for schools, the Sacramento County Office of Education's guidance for schools, the CDE just came out with theirs Monday, their guidance for schools, and then EAB, the Education Advisory Board, which we belong to, they put out their guidance based on their research as well. Just trying to get some type of a background of where we're going, what works, and what has worked in other places.
Thank you.
Any questions, Jeremy or Roulette?
No, talk to me.
Okay. I think that's it then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate it. And Mr. Lamb.
Comments from the audience regarding items not on the agenda? Do you have anything that's come through the computer? No? All right. That brings us to board and superintendent reports. Mrs. Anderson.
I just have some questions. The graduation that's being planned, is anybody up to date on that?
To some degree, yes. The drive-through,
Yeah.
yes.
I understand from talking to a few parents that the last they heard, it was gonna be on the field. And with the rapid changing of everything and what's opening up, is there any chance that we could let these kids graduate on the field?
On the field, I think the call was if we get to the point of this June 19th date, I think, I'm looking at Don, I don't know why, just that we will try to make the call going in the future because we aren't seeing that it's gonna be able to have a mass of 300 kids on the field. And also the group, as we talked with the group, or I didn't talk, as they were talking to the group, a lot of the kids were starting to go away and they weren't going to be there. So the sooner we could do it, kind of seemed the theme, so we're not starting to exclude people based on going off on the military. I know you were on one of the calls, now I don't know if it was in. So as far as making that happen, they made the call that this way we could still get the idea or honor of crossing the stage, have their name called out, and then they will be stitching the whole thing, that's the wrong word, but they'll be putting the whole thing together with speeches and stuff
Are
like
we
that.
doing it before the 19th then?
I think it's gonna be on the 19th.
Wasn't there a letter sent today or
They're
yesterday stating that it's gonna be a drive-through on the 19th at 6 or 6:30?
on Monday, it went out, yes,
On Monday.
Oh, it's already been out.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason was we couldn't get everyone into by the time you get in the stadium and get back the thing, so we will be able to replicate the vision for it, I guess you could say. It's not ideal. I mean, people are doing the best they can with this. I know they met Monday, had a big group trying to plan to do the best they can with each of the different ideas. It's not going to be the same, but at the end of the day, they're going to get probably 3 kind of celebrations for those, and then they'll get the video with it, which will have the kids' speeches and different things that they'll put together. So again, we all feel sorry, and I know, sorry, Donald, this is even more important to you probably than even us with having a senior, but we are trying to give them the best we possibly can with the
Oh, I
conditions.
know you are. I was just, if there was any way possible, we could let them walk on the field.
So we did have, and we did not encourage this, but the field was open at the couple of the pickups, and a lot of kids were out there on the field doing cap and gown things and stuff like that. So, but as far as that,
I mean, if they can riot downtown, they can graduate, The other question I had is sports. A lot of the teams are practicing in other school districts. They're
so,
having football games, they're planning on a football team.
so then that's kind of what I just had mentioned, is the idea that's what we're working with our local school districts and even regionally. See, there are a few that are, I know it's conditioning, and so I think it's groups of 5 can come out, and I think you and I kind of talked a little bit, Donald might know a little more. They can come out, they can lift weights, they can run, but there's very strict protocols. So that's what we were talking about with this group that we'll be joining tomorrow to try to figure out what's the best way to get back. In fact, there was an article today in Sacramento Bee where it said, the headline, I rolled out of bed, opened it up, to high school sports are coming back, and they said the key word is patience, because it may even take, in fact, I saw one of the coaches today, and he said, are we coming back? And I said, I'm very hopeful.
Who's in that group?
I'm sorry?
Who's in that group that's going?
The group for, I'm sorry, what group?
You said that there's.
So
a
the
group.
superintendents were asked to start the group, and so right now I know Mike is going to be present at it, and I asked Gerald if he could join too. It's not coaches right now because they want to get the level, and then it's going to roll to that. It's going to have to progress into that. Some districts have like activity or athletic directors for the entire district. That is their sole job, the bigger districts. And so we're kind of tagging along with these guys to make sure. The intent, I feel, is to figure out a way to get back.
Will our athletic director be in it?
So it's just gonna have
Not yet at this point. At this point, it was superintendents
Superintendent?
and then other districts, and we actually got added into it at a later date, but I said I want to kind of come along.
Does our athletic director get any prep time or anything to do his job as athletic director?
Yes,
He does?
Yes,
Are you
there's-
sure?
yeah.
That's my question. How's the athletic director not involved in that?
Well, this happened just yesterday, that we got asked to be involved, and right now they had said it was for, they want to just start the planning with superintendents, and we believe that we will then ratchet to that. But I didn't want to bring 10 people to a group that I kind of pushed my way into. So once we see where it's
I
going,
hope you guys agree with me. I hope you guys agree with what I'm gonna say, but we gotta, I mean, I'm not just saying this because he's my brother, so put that to the side. But any athletic director, you gotta make them feel like they're doing their job. I mean, you know, and so.
I agree with
In
you.
some cases, people feel like their jobs have been taken away from them.
okay.
There's,
Exactly, that's my point.
yeah,
So,
there's some issues going on underneath the
okay.
water surface.
So my intent with this was to try and get people at the table, and then we'll have to see how, because this is the first meeting, and again, to be very honest, we were not included in the beginning. It was 6 other districts, and so kind of said, hey, can we be a part of it? Because I didn't want to be left out, so I feel like we're getting a seat. So if once that, I'm certainly have no problem with athletic directors being a part of it. I need to see the lay of the land though before I just start bringing a huge team to something. And that's purely just from trying to go into someone else's house. I don't want to bring too many guests at this point, but I'm not opposed to it.
And I just wanted to add,
I'm
Scott's
not
too nice.
attacking you, Scott, so please don't take it that way.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
He said don't take it as serious.
I said, I'm not, yeah, I said, I'm not attacking you, so please don't take it the wrong way.
Oh, no, I hear you. Again, and I will tell you, that did cross my mind, but based on the list of people they said were coming, it didn't sound like it was at the athletic director unless it was district people. So my thought on this was, since I was honing in on it, I figured it would be good for us to see it and then come back. This is not gonna be one meeting and then it's done. It's gonna take some time.
Okay.
And I don't, and that's why I asked actually.
Mr. Larry Craig, too nice to say it, but he got us a seat at the table when we weren't invited. So the only reason we're at the table is because he made it happen. He deserves credit.
Well, thank you for getting us at the table.
What, I didn't catch what he said.
He said Mr. Lair
He got
invited
us a seat at
himself
the
to
table.
the meeting,
Oh,
and he got
We
a
weren't
seat at the
invited.
table. We're small.
If you happen to see on Monday night, there was a release that went out with 6 districts that said they were going to solve the problem and left a few of us out. And we've worked really collaboratively as a group. So I figured I might as well ask and got the invitation. So
Wondering why only the 6? Are they just the largest school district?
I'm not sure, and I won't speculate because I got a seat now. And so I do want to make sure that everyone understands that there was. There's no
Jeremy.
there's no intent to slight anyone. I need to
No,
see
I
the lay of
know.
the land before because
I
we were like, let's go, and then when they said the list of people who are coming, it was more of like a district and a principal thing, and so I want to get the lay, and then I think as the details come out, there's no way in my
I
mind.
don't think it's had anything to do with you or that group.
Oh.
I think this is stuff that's gone on at the site that
Okay,
people are upset over.
okay. So we'll let that lie. So we will get seats at the table, we'll see, and then we'll invite the people we can. Any other questions?
No, that's my questions.
Mrs. Pope?
I hope you're all having a wonderful summer.
I just want to reiterate what Mr. Wilson had said last month. We just have a great relationship with our bargaining units, and we appreciate you very much. It's a team effort, and the district and our bargaining units work very well together, so thank you. And thank Ms. Mason if you're still on. I'd like to thank Mr. Jordan, Mr. Cabinet in general. I mean, you've worked very hard. I know Mr. Lair has said that, but I wanted to tell you that as well. And then at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Wilson did state that we had an evaluation, but he didn't say whose evaluation. So it was the superintendent's evaluation. And I just want to tell Mr. Lair that we appreciate you and you've done a great job. And with this distant learning and getting the cabinet together and going through with this, we appreciate the communication and we thank you. And have a great summer, everybody. We'll see you in July.
Absolutely, ditto what she said.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Hunt, do you have a report?
No report today, Mr. Wilson.
No report from Mr. Hunt. Mr. Bailey, do you have a report?
I just don't want to say, not really a report, but I just want to thank all you guys for supporting me last week. Some unfortunate health issues came up that I didn't expect, and I just couldn't have made it to the meeting via phone or not in person. And I'm pretty much bedridden nowadays, so I appreciate your guys' support.
We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate
We
it.
wish you the best.
We're doing a lot.
Keep in touch.
Mr. Lair, you have a report?
Sure. I just want to take an opportunity. I want to thank Lisa. She's sitting over here. I won't have to say it to the phone, but budget this year has been most unique, probably one of the most unique years. Even before we had cuts and stuff, we actually knew what the cuts were. Now we don't even know what they are, and we're trying to plan the best we can. So I just have to give a shout out to her and her office, the team, for pulling things together and keeping us on the straight and narrow. And then it must be Lisa's night tonight. I just wanted to commend both Craig and Lisa. 2 weeks ago, we spent afternoon talking with the Bond Council, which is our rating agency for the bonds. So basically, it helps create the narrative for when people look at the bonds that we want to sell to see how we're rated. And Craig and Lisa did an outstanding job helping support that. And as a result, as I share with the board, our rating did not drop. Most people thought in the environment we were in, our consultant said, you're probably going to drop, so be ready for it. And we maintained the A+ rating that we had, which is fantastic, which, as you all know, the better credit rating you have, the better interest rates you get. So I compliment them because it's weird. It's like one more thing on those duties that we all do. And it was thrown in. We've gone to San Francisco and done it. Now we're doing it on Zoom, so it adds a whole different element, and it just showed that we wowed them as we do. And then I think one thing, and I've asked Mr. Grimes to look into this a little bit, that we're going to try to find a way. We left this year without acknowledging some of our retirees, and usually we do our May 5th, and we give them their plaques. We have all the plaques for them, but we're trying to find a way to acknowledge them. So I just want to acknowledge all the retirees who have left our team, our family this year, and just say thank you for what you've done. And we're going to find a way to honor them, even if it's starting to get some sort of release out or something, just because I think it's important not to let them fade away, although some of them say, Scott, we'd rather fade away and just do our own thing. So I wanted to just acknowledge that. And then finally, the planning and the stress that we're all under with the guidelines being out from multiple agencies, you have people having different political and different visions of what it needs to be. It has created a very difficult time for us in education, and I just want to compliment the group here, the group that has helped us do this, because our administrators, different people who are contributing to this, it's a lot of work and a lot of brain power going into it. And it's funny, Donald, through a lot of this, I keep thinking of you, because I'm like, Center's going to be one that's prepared no matter where we go. We're going to be prepared, and we're not just going to be the day before going, well, what are we going to do now? But that would not be without the staff thinking about this 24 hours a day, sending emails, reading articles, doing different things to try to do the best thing we can for kids. And that's, at the end of the day, I can tell you our team is working really hard to do what's best for kids in the environment we're in. And we're going to get criticized no matter how you look at it. But we're going to try to do our very best for the kids in our community and family. So I thank them all in this room because I can see them.
I'm so proud of this district, every single one of you guys,
Yep.
Teachers, classified, administrating, everybody has pulled together in an absolute wonderful way.
Yep.
And I thank every one of you for doing what you do every single day.
Yeah. And it's a unique group of people because we have people, it's summer, and there are people who are done with contracts, done with their days, and I did a voluntary, I don't know if you call it Zoom or Google Meet, and I had almost every single person that I invited on that meeting, and they're all, quote, on vacation now. So to me, I think that shows a lot because they care about what they're doing and they want to do it right and do it well. And so to me, that says a lot for who we are. So anyway, I will leave with the thanks, and then it's a happy summer to everyone. It doesn't feel like summer. It didn't feel like spring either. So it might be Christmas before we know it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I didn't have a report, but my dude said something which made me think of something. And so I got kind of a little put it in your brain, and then also a question that I don't expect you to answer tonight, but want to be a topic of conversation as we move forward. So we laid out all those scenarios, but I know like one of the things that's going on with sports, if you read like the National Federation of High School document, they're like, if there's a vaccine, we can come back. If there's a cure, we can come back. If there's an effective treatment, we can come back. If there's herd immunity, we can come back. But the very political doctor at the Sacramento Office of Health has said Sacramento's guidance is going to be not until there's a vaccine. There won't be a vaccine for 12 to 18 months, and she's already writing off football, basketball in the winter, softball and baseball in the spring because she's taking such this narrow path. So let's say the world's moving forward, but Sac County still has that advisement, even if all the other counties around us don't. What part of what I'd like in that conversation as we decide to move forward is how, which directions are we going to take? Because I do not think we should deny our kids all of those things because of one person in one office that's made a decision, even if everybody else realizes or no. So I guess that's kind of my question, not to be answered now, but to be part of the thought process. When we have these conflicting experts and we have these conflicting guidances, do we have common sense lead the way rather than, that's the problem I had with our June 2nd report that we took from the County Office of Education is we painted ourselves into a corner, and a lot of the public's not going to know that's a guide. They're going to think that's an official document that all the school districts put out. So I would just like to see a little bit more thought process, and I know we will, but I want to state it publicly for the record. I'd like to see more thought process like we usually do than what's going on there. I know like in Wheatland, they started conditioning on May 27th, and having been a football coach and knowing the way that works, you never get into pads until you've been conditioning into pads. You don't even condition into pads until you've already been conditioning to be in the condition to be able to wear pads and play. And there's no contact in conditioning. So kind of like what you were talking about with the other ones moving forward. I don't want to put our athletes at risk for something that doesn't contain contact anyway, for something that they're largely distanced from anyway. And I know we're trying to take other people's guidance, but when that time comes, I want to see us exercise.
But if we offer the sports, the parents can decide whether the child participates or not.
But right now, there would be no contact anyway in conditioning. So all that's happening is we're putting our students at a disadvantage physically. So
And these kids need it.
That's it for board and superintendent reports. That brings us to the consent agenda. Is there a motion? The consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Anderson. Do we have a second?
Mr. Wilson, you were supposed to call number 2?
Did you do that?
Yeah, that's what I
Sorry.
said.
Yeah,
As amended.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I missed that, sorry. Okay, sorry. Just making sure.
Sure. So do we have a second?
Cheryl, second.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Hunt seconds. We have a motion and second on the consent agenda. Items 1 through 21 minus item 2. Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson, aye. Mrs. Pope.
Aye.
Mrs. Pope, aye. Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Hunt, aye. Mr. Jabali.
Aye.
Mr. Jabali, aye. Chair votes aye. It's 5-0. That brings us to item number 2. Do we have a motion on item number 2?
Also motion.
We have a motion by Mrs. Pope.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second by Mrs. Anderson. Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson, aye. Mrs. Pope?
Aye.
Mrs. Pope, aye. Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt, aye. Mr. Jabali?
Yes, sir.
Aye.
Aye. The chair would recommend you vote abstain.
Yes.
Oh.
Abstain, I'm sorry, you're correct.
All right, Mr. Jabali votes abstain, chair votes aye, that's 4-0-1. All right. That brings us to business item A. Business item A is the mission statement. It says it's a discussion, not a vote. And I know that Mrs. Anderson had some interest in this, so would you like to start, Mrs. Anderson?
Well, I just wanted to go back and, I'm sorry, I just wanted to go back and look at the old mission statement compared to the new mission statement. It's been years since we've seen it, and see what we wanted to do with it, if we wanted to go back or look at.
Yeah, so the first in the backup for the board packet, the first one is the mission statement that is currently, I think that was done, I want to say 10 years ago. Yeah. And then if you go beyond that, those were two other ones that we were able to kind of dig up that were utilized as kind of the mission or the statement. So one of the things that we could do is, I have heard people think that maybe we could update this. I have heard that, especially when we've been working on our LCAP and different things. So one of the things I'm happy to do, just from a standpoint of getting together and timing, if we want, I could take this up when we come back in fall, maybe when things settle down, I get a group of people together to look at it, come back and talk, if that's something the board wants to do, to revisit it. It would be hard to put it on our plate right now, just as a priority, because that's just the reality. So whatever the board wishes, I'm happy to pursue, or if you guys are good with it for now, we'll revisit it another time. I'm fine with that as well.
I guess the question I would have is, especially, I know, I remember when we rewrote this, and, you know, Mrs. Anderson's been a while and remembers a few of them. Could we just not have a board work group?
What?
If that's where the interest is, I mean.
Board workshop.
Board work group on this, developing it?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And I
mean, because I don't know why we burden staff with it, or I don't know what group you were thinking of.
I was thinking, when we did this, it went wide. It was community, parents, staff, all, you know, it was, it's not, that's why I was hesitant to say, let's just do it. It was wider than that, and it took time. I mean, it was probably, I don't know if you were a part of it from a parent perspective, but it did take some time to go through it. So there's a process we go through. We've done mission vision statements for the school sites. You got to work through it, brainstorm.
Right.
So it's not let's just craft it and we stick it out. But you want people to buy into it and understand it and believe it, not just.
Right. Mrs. Anderson, how do you feel about leaving as for now?
I like it the way it is, actually.
But come back to it in December, like
Yeah,
later
that's
on
fine.
next year, so.
That's
I
fine.
think it needs to be updated. I like it the way it is, but I do believe things have changed a lot within the district and the community, and it does need to be revamped. And maybe have a work group, whoever it is, but for right now, leave it, because I think you guys are a little busy.
And it may turn out that the group's like, hey, this meets our needs still, but at least then we can vet it through that process. That's fine with me.
If everybody's good with
What do
it
you
now,
think,
it
Mrs.
doesn't sound like
Anderson?
there's much more discussion.
I think it was the Appendix C one that I was upset with when it was
C.
brought forward.
Prior to 2006.
Oh, yeah,
That
no,
was
we got rid of that.
Prior
All right.
to
Yeah,
2006.
it was
Everybody's
prior
happy.
to this last one.
Can I check that off my list?
Yeah, check that
Yeah.
off your list.
All right.
All right, well, that
Wish
was
they were all that easy.
Yes.
All right, so that brings us to business item business item B, COVID-19 operations written report. Do we have, I'm not even sure what the motion would be. Is it
Yeah, so
something
we
we're
just,
accepting?
just a motion to approve it, and Mike can elaborate if you need, but basically what it is with LCAP being pushed to December, the state has come back and said, we want you to answer these questions as it relates, kind of as an LCAP temporary holder, and so they said, complete this. I think we sent it to the county, and that just shows we did it, and then we'll come back with our LCAP. So it's kind of like a snapshot of what we had.
So is this just like, we don't know where we are right now, they want answers from us, the motion is to allow staff to put together reports?
The report is that the wording is in there. It's like 4 pages. It was just answering 6 questions that they had. That's all it was. We are required to present it to you guys, and then we will, Lisa, does it go to the county? I don't even know if it goes to the county.
I submit it with the budget.
Okay. So you know how usually with LCAP, we have the public hearing on not only the LCAP document, but the budget, and then we come back a week later. They're saying as an interim stopgap, here's this document, do Lisa's working budget, we will submit those, and then we're gonna come back in 5 months. and do
So the
same thing.
motion would be to approve
Correct.
staff responses?
Correct.
All right, so,
I got a question, just a second.
okay.
Who answered the question? Was it the business department?
It was across curriculum instruction, I gave input, Lisa gave input, I think. She was at a meeting, we talked about it. So it really was, it's really the LCAP kind of writing committee, Becky Lawson was involved, so we had, but really, we do have to give credit with LCAP to Tammy Jabali, because she is the wordsmith behind it. We just give her all the great ideas, and she does it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, congratulations, Tammy.
All right, so if that's business item B, do we have a motion?
I'll motion.
Okay, Ms. Pope motions to approve. We have a second.
I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. Hunt. Is there any further discussion on this item now that it's on the floor? Not seeing or hearing any. Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson votes aye. Mrs. Pope?
Aye.
Mrs. Pope, aye. Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt votes aye. Mr. Bailey?
Aye.
Mr. Bailey votes aye. Chair votes aye. That's 5-0. That motion is out. That brings us to business item C, a resolution to establish temporary interfund transfers of special or restricted monies.
So when I do a cash flow projection, I have to take into account that the state is likely to do deferrals. And so one deferral will come in June of the next fiscal year, 2021. And that will take our general fund balance down below zero. So this allows me to borrow funds from Fund 17 to cover that cash flow deficit until the funds come in from the state. The funds will come in 2 weeks later. And so then I'll replenish Fund 17 in the next fiscal year.
Okay. I remember back in the day, we had Fund 17, Fund 25, we could go back and forth, we did not spend it. So is Fund 17 still the surplus we have from the sale of the old land? So would it be that, because I know for a couple of years there when the state wasn't sending us money, we had to do trans, which cost us
Correct.
money. So
Yeah.
would this, either is it, or for lack of a better description, is this replacing a trans?
It
So we don't
is.
have to pay the bank money?
Exactly.
But we can replace it with no problem, there's no
Correct.
restriction.
And I can borrow from Fund 25 also, all the developer fees,
Oh, really?
temporarily. So it's any fund.
So this will basically save us the money of a trans
Exactly, paying the
transaction.
interest.
Yes, okay.
Very nice. When was the last time we did a trans?
Before my time.
Good. That's good. That's good to hear.
So, any discussion, any questions for Lisa, either here or on the phone? Not hearing any discussion. Do you have anything on the computer, Carol? All right. Do we have a motion then?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mrs. Anderson to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mrs. Pope. So on the item, Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson, aye. Mrs. Pope.
Aye.
Mrs. Pope, aye. Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Hunt, aye. Mr. Chibali.
Aye.
Mr. Chibali, aye. Chair votes aye, 5-0. That brings us to business item D, adopted budget for fiscal year 2021. I believe that's still Lisa.
That is still me. This is the first of 3 budgets that you will see. As it says on there, this is as of May 29th. There are some things that have even changed since then. So this is a snapshot based on what we know. Looking forward, the budget will be adopted by the legislature, or put forth to the governor by the legislature on June 15th. And then they have to approve it by July 1. And so we will have another budget review 45 days after it's approved. That will be the August meeting, and we'll look at it then.
It's crazy.
Unfortunately, the tax revenue isn't coming in until July 15th, until after they pass their budget. So their budget's a working budget. They'll amend their budget, which means that I'll amend my budget a 3rd time, and that should come forward in September. SCOE is aware of this, and so they are not even looking at certification, a positive or negative qualified certification, until September. because they know that this is kind of a working document. As we go through this, I just want to mention that most of the expenditures, though, are accurate. They shouldn't change too much. Perhaps if we have some changes in the PERS and STRS relief, there may be some changes with that. There are some changes with staffing, as we don't fill positions as we figure out that we don't need them, and that will change. But those other budgets, the supplies and materials and contracts, those should not change from one budget to the next.
Are the salaries for retirees eliminated from the stuff?
So I have a question as you start this.
Oh, yeah.
So when we look at these numbers, since it's all in flux, are these numbers our numbers no matter what, or are these numbers assuming federal money comes in and gets passed through? What's the assumptions on the?
Each slide I'll go through and I'll hit on that. Okay, so the May revision assumes that the state will suffer the $41.2 billion loss in revenues through 1920 and 2021 combined. In 1920, that's 9.1 billion, and in 2021, 32.2 billion loss of revenue for education, for the state, sorry. Revenue losses are compounded by the growing number of Californians who need access to the state safety net services, so that brings the shortfall to $54 million in the governor's budget. So after accounting for Prop 98 allocations, the 3-year hit to the K-12 share of Prop 98 is about $15.1 billion. This loss is covered by cuts and deferrals in the governor's budget. Now I want to put in here that the Senate and the House came out with their own separate budget that is very different from the governor's budget. They don't have the cuts in there. So this is based on the governor's revised only. And I want to stop for a minute. If you're listening on the phone, the PowerPoint presentation's on the back of the budget documents, so you can follow along in your packet if you didn't know that already. Okay, Prop 98, the 15.1 billion, this is just shows how they'll cut it. The deferral is in there, the 1.9 billion from June to July in 2021. There's also some sweeping of funds. There's additional deferrals in 2021. There's the 10% cut to LCFF I mentioned in the last meeting. There's cuts to categoricals that I mentioned in the last meeting as well. So all of that will get to the $15.1 billion of reductions. This just is a visual of the COLA. The state is still giving us our mandated COLA of 2.31%, and then they're suspending it. So on paper, you may see that we're getting the COLA, but we're really not getting the COLA. There are also...
So that's not included in the budget yet?
It's not included in the budget. It's included in the budget, and then it's reduced by 10%.
Yeah.
The categoricals also will not get the COLA. The mandated block grants and special education hit us. So this says that the May revision suspends that 2.3% COLA and then includes another cut to get to the 10% COLA. And it shows you what those numbers will be if you're interested. So what it looks like, changes in LCFF funding, this is changes, not the actual funding. The purple is that gap funding that we used to get that was really exciting. It was above and beyond just to fill what the state owed us, and so that went away in 1920, and which brings our, we didn't get as much of an increase as we had gotten in past years. And then, of course, in 2021, there is a huge reduction in our LCFF funding by 10%. As I mentioned, the deferrals for 1920, the full June apportionment will be deferred to July. In 2021, the deferrals will come from a portion of April, all of May, and all of June. And then they aren't quite sure when they're going to pay us back, but they think maybe July, August, and September of 21-22. So that is a big hit, and we really have to watch cash flow next year.
And that will be returned 100%.
Yes, and I believe,
Right?
and I believe with extra.
Some interest
Yeah.
or
yeah, a little bit more than what they're taking. And this is just a picture of what the deferrals look like. There are some relief measures. Most don't apply to us. For example, exemption from deferrals for hardship reasons. We don't qualify for that. The second one does affect us. The routine maintenance account, we have to put forth 3% towards it, 3% of our expenditures towards it, and that gets reduced a little bit through some accounting issues. Also, we can increase our internal interfund borrowing limits if we need to. The rest don't apply to us. CalSTRS and PERS, the state is taking their portion and giving it to the employer, and so that reduces our contribution by about 2% for each group this 2021 and 21-22. Stimulus funds. So we are getting $1.2 million in the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds. That's federal revenue. There aren't very many restrictions. We can use it just for keeping operations going. We have to spend it by September 21, and so I'm spending it on transportation. I just moved their salaries to this fund to make it clean, and I may move their whole budget to this. The CARES Act, learning loss mitigation, that's federal revenue that comes through the state. The state still has not determined how they're going to give it to school districts. So I have no idea what the formula will be or how much we'll be getting. So that is not included in the budget, but we know we're getting that. So that's exciting, that will help. I honestly don't know if it's 500,000 or $1 million. I have no idea, but anything is helpful.
Not less than 500,000.
We don't know.
I have no
Just
idea.
don't-
I just
All
Could
we
be
know-
25,000 for all we know.
Right.
The pot of money is pretty significant, but we have no idea how they're gonna divide it up, and they're still fighting over it, because originally it was for like concentration, and then some districts were like, we're gonna get nothing, and others like us would do better, so I think they're probably gonna do a straight LCFF calculation, but we don't know, so we don't put it in, because we don't know.
And then the COVID LEA response funds, we received $70,000 for that, and we bought the Chromebooks so that we can replace the ones that come back broken or don't come back at all. Okay, so this slide was updated a little bit from your packet, just 2 lines. So I put in the $1.2 million. This is stimulus, reductions, and savings that we'll get next year, because as you see later, we have a gap to fill. So we will get the $1.2 million in the ESSER federal stimulus. The STRS PERS employer reduction is saving us $643,000. This has already been included in the budget. The routine restricted maintenance account has been reduced by $175,000. That's been included. The CARES Act fund, that has not been included. We don't know the amount still. We reduced our technology budget. Usually we have $400,000 we spend each year to upgrade technology, and we reduced it by $300,000. So our budget is $100,000 this year. Craig's budget is $100,000 this year. We're swiping some of the lottery funds from school sites and then spending it on the $100,000 that we usually spend on curriculum to buy new textbooks, replace textbooks. And then we are keeping site carryover, which is about $100,000. That total is $2.5 million, and most of that has been included in the budget. The following items have not been included in the budget. We're going to take our CTIG funds that we usually just use on one-time expenditures, because we don't know what we're getting from year to year, and we're going to use that on salaries this year. So that will save $110,000 from the general fund. As of today, staff attrition is $481,072. Those are positions that we don't need to fill, so that's a true savings. Staff turnover, so staff that's higher on the salary schedule leaving and newer or mid-range people coming in, it's about $200,000 savings as of right now. That's hard to determine because we have not yet met with them to see what type of health and welfare benefits they'll take, and that can range from $7,000 to $17,000. And we're still working on figuring out where they're on the salary schedule too. So that could go up. I underestimated that amount. And then unspent unrestricted funds, so that money that falls out at the end of the year, that is going to come from utilities and sub-cost and other, just items that have not been, we have not spent as much on. That will be about 400,000. So a little over 1 million has not been included in the budget that I imagine will appear for us. Any questions on that slide?
And just a point, like the CTIG, some of those are one-time in nature and those cause problems in our out years, but, and I'm not celebrating staff attrition and staff turnover, but those are ongoing, so those are good. Those help us in that next year out. Because the problem is like ESSER funds, those are all stimulus, those are one-time. They help you, they look great this year, and then next year, why do we have a $2 million hole? Well, because we had $2 million in one-time money. So that, just to point that out, so anything that we can find that's ongoing is way better.
And another 100,000 that you just emailed me about with special ed, we're going to get a little bit more special ed.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and that's not on here. When I look at ADA, we are hopefully going to have new students from all those homes that are coming in. There is in the legislature's proposal, hold harmless on ADA. So I don't know what that will look like. That will be interesting. Hopefully it's just, we won't go lower, but if we grow, of course, we get the higher ADA. So total unrestricted revenue. This is the money coming in, and this shows our cut. So in 1920, we received $44.6 million in unrestricted revenue. That's all state funding, lottery, and LCFF mostly. And then in 2021, it goes down to 40.1 million, so that's a cut of $3.77 million of revenue that we are losing. So that is a significant cut, obviously, to our budget. When I look at revenue versus expenditures, contributions, transfers, this is unrestricted and restricted funds. At this point, usually I just look at unrestricted funds because that's the money that we can spend on anything. But now I'm looking at everything, because if we can take some money from restricted and make sure we like CTIG and pay salaries with it, then that will help us. And it also matters for cash flow. So in 1920, we deficit spent by about $3 million. But one-time funds of that was $3.2 million. So that was federal program carryover, that was grants ending, like the low-performing student block grant. We did the field construction using cell tower money, we bought curriculum, we did 21st century classrooms, and it all added up to where we weren't really deficit spending with ongoing funds. However, in 2021, there is a deficit of $2.7 million, and that is ongoing funds. There is no one-time budget in there. If I go back to that other slide of saving $1 million, that helps this. So instead of 2.7, it would be 1.7. And then each year it gets worse. When I look at spendable general fund, unrestricted and restricted ending fund balance, so that's taking out stores and our revolving account. It's any money that we can spend. It also includes our 3% mandated reserve. In 1920, we should have $5.2 million at least that we will have at the end of the year in cash that's spendable. Again, that 1 million will be added to it. In 2021, we will have for sure at least $3 million that is able to be spent, or 4 million if we add in that 1 million. Then we get to 21-22, and now we don't have enough money to pay the bills, and that's a deficit of 1.1 million. Hopefully that 1 million I keep talking about will keep us even in 21-22. But in 22-23, the deficit is too great to overcome, and we will not be able to meet our obligations absent any changes in the economy from the federal government, etc.
Craig, build more houses.
That's true. More kids will bring more money. In other funds, I only put the money that we can take and spend and we don't have to pay back. And that would be Fund 17. Right now we have about $2.5 million in there. And then the Fund 20, the other post-employment benefits, we have a little more than 600,000 in there. We can take that to general fund and we don't have to pay those back. Those are special reserve funds that we're allowed to swipe. So that would also help us get through the second year out if we needed it. And as I said before, this is just a glimpse in time. It will change in August, and then it will change in September. So I'm not asking for a certification at this time. This is just a FYI for you.
So is this not an action item?
Well, it is, you still have to adopt the
Adopt it,
budget.
but we're not certifying it as
Right.
our budget, it's just, it's that we're approving it, working.
Right.
Any questions for Lisa here on the phone?
I don't know, probably Scott would know more than you, Lisa, but our maximum student count that we had back when, do you know what that was?
I think we PE back in 15, like 6,000, we were at like 6,100, 6,200, back when McClellan was.
That's when we were topped out, right?
Yes, and that's
At that
when we had,
point.
charters had just come on, and I think that included Antelope View, and they were running with 500 kids or 1,000 kids. Yeah, and so we've lost, up until now, I think we've lost about 100 kids a year since the base closed. It's kind of a good.
What are
more
we
than
now?
100. Just,
A little more than 4,000.
yeah, like 4,300,
Yeah.
43 enrollment, and then in the attendance slide, we actually ticked up a little bit
Yeah.
for attendance this year.
41.
We were up just a
Yeah.
few kids from last year.
So we're 4,100 though.
Attending, that's attendance, but then for enrollment, we're about 43, I think 43.2. So,
Okay.
and then this was the first year we saw an uptick, and I'm cautiously optimistic, but we're seeing the kids come out of the homes over here, we're having conversations, so hopefully it'll see. Plus, we've got some new people moving.
We have lots of expanding room to grow before we have to build.
We have
We're
some,
into it.
we have some facilities that we can utilize, yes. I think Craig would want to get rid of a lot of those old portables, but yes, we would.
Yeah, okay.
We have
Thank you.
capacities.
Any other questions?
No, but thank you, Lisa.
I don't know if I have a question, much of the comment, I was on using the one-time money, Fund 17, I guess if we use that in the 21-22 school year to kind of prop ourselves up a little bit, that wouldn't mean the world. I'm not sure I feel about the OPEB fund, so that seems to be a little on a different level, and I don't know that I would advocate for that. I guess my other question is, when would you, Lisa, be putting together a district budget committee and looking at potential areas for reductions? I mean, I don't need to tell you, you know that $1 million saved next year is $3 million saved in the third out year, and so the sooner we get something going, the better off we are.
Yeah, right now, we've just been meeting with cabinet and admin and going over what we can do, keeping the cuts as far away, of course, from the classroom as possible. That is something that I can talk to Scott about and can get set up for sure.
And I think that's, we're trying
My
to,
recommendation would move super aggressively with that and get it going as soon as possible.
Okay.
and then hopefully with the state budget being signed, although the numbers will, at least we'll have an idea. And this is still worst case scenario that we
Right.
know today. I guess it could be worse, but we're basing it on the most conservative approach we can. But I agree, that's why we're looking at all these positions, and you see even that 500,000 ongoing, you're right, that's like 1.5 in that third year out. It's just, it multiplies, or exponentially.
So if I heard
And
Mr.
I
Hunt,
realize this is, you've done your homework and basis on the worst case scenario, but I imagine the governor has based his budget on his best case scenario. So I'm not sure what he's thinking.
I hope not, don't say that.
That is true.
Were you going to say something, Doug?
yeah, so I think I heard Mr. Hunt correctly. He wants us, Lisa and staff, to start saving $3 million for the next.
No, he said, could we get a budget committee, and chime in, Jeremy, if I don't say this correctly. Get a budget committee,
I can
because
hear the question, Donald.
well, Del Rey was saying, do you want to cut $3 million now? And I was saying, no, you were suggesting getting a budget committee, because anything we can save now, like if we saved $1 million this year, 3 years out, that's $3 million. So it wasn't you want $3 million in cuts today. It was, can we get a budget committee together? Is that correct?
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, no, he wasn't asking for $3 million.
Wow.
Okay.
Pretty aggressive, Mr. Hunt.
And then I think that brings our discussion to an end, does it? Or is there more? Okay, so item D, do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mrs. Anderson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
All right, Mrs. Pope beat you to the punch, Mr. Hunt, so second by Mrs. Pope. So Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson votes aye. Mrs. Pope.
Aye.
Mrs. Pope votes aye. Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Hunt votes aye. Mr. Trevally.
Aye.
Mr. Trevally votes aye. Chair votes aye. 5-0. That brings us to advanced planning, which I think is wrong. Our next
August
meeting is not June 10th.
August 19th is the next regular
It's
meeting.
August 19th
Yes.
will be the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
But I would hope, I'm thinking July
15th.
July 15th, that we could put that on as a meeting to come back. That'll give us 3 weeks before school starts. It gives us 5 weeks approximately from now. So hopefully we'll have a better picture, we'll have some more planning, and then we can go from there. So if you guys put that aside, and if things totally change, obviously
You
I'll
said
reach out.
July 17th or 15th?
15th.
15th.
All
That
right,
would be
so
the
our
third
next,
Wednesday.
our next regularly scheduled meeting is August 19th, but we're probably going to be returning July 15th in order to be into the new school year. We don't normally have a July meeting. Any suggested agenda items for either of those meetings? Not hearing any.
Are we
Seeing
gonna
any?
give any, what are we gonna do about football practice? I mean, give any direction on that?
Well, that's what we're doing tomorrow, the first meeting we're starting, as far
Mm-hmm.
as getting that going, to see what guidelines we can come up with to get it rolling.
Okay, so you're gonna give the direction on that?
Well, we're gonna start, that's what we're working as a collaborative with. Remember I said we're gonna have, I pushed my way in to get to the meeting, so if we
Right,
can start
but
seeing what.
What I'm
regional-
saying is, how are we gonna implement that? If you guys decide we're gonna start football now, or are we gonna wait a whole month before we get?
Oh, you mean for board approval to start? My
Yeah.
thought would be if we have guidelines that are that we would move forward with those guidelines. I wasn't thinking I would
We
have.
don't really need to board approval for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we?
I don't know, I was asking him what
I
he
think
was
it's
gonna
more of
do.
a question of are they going to go with National High School Federation or are they going to go with Sacramento County Ed Health? And there's conflicting things out there, so I think that's part of what they'll look at. Or are the standards that Wheatland's using, if those meet the social distancing requirements, we can all start conditioning, right?
Well, the problem with Wheatland, some of those little places, they never had a COVID case.
Right.
You know, so that's a little different, but
So that's
I
why.
agree with Donald, let's not take one person's word over everything else and decide to go extra precautions, where parents can make a decision if we have, those kids need to be doing something, they've been locked in the house long enough.
Right.
Parents can decide if we have it, whether they want their child to play or not.
Right.
Fair enough, I think.
Right, and that's what we're trying to come up with is collectively, what is that best approach that we can all do? And then you present that plan to whomever the power that be, or we say this is the way we're all gonna move forward, and then you start going. Now, like I said, we gotta have a little patience with it, and maybe things may be pushed back a little bit than usual, but since we're going to be in this together, then we're all in it together. You know, first game may be, and I'm, for whatever sport, maybe a week after, or whatever, but that way we're all in the same boat. To Mr. Wilson's point, we're not allowing our kids to have less time so they might get hurt or
Right.
whatever. So we're trying to make it a collective approach to that.
Providing we have coaching staff, they may decide they don't want to coach because of, you know, I mean,
That
it's
is
gotta
true.
go all the
Or,
way
I mean,
around.
and actually, Mr. Wilson and I talked about this too. What if a lot of parents opt out and you can't even field a team, or we can only field, and we're just speaking football, let's say right now, we can only field a varsity team. You know, we don't know. So that's the thing, but I think the point is, how can we get our athletes across all of our sports starting, you know, cross country's coming up, they're probably out running on their own, that's a little different than, you know, football, but how do we get them back running running and doing these things.
I just think kids need some options right now. They've had it with staying home.
All right, continuation of closed session, I don't hear or see any need for that, which brings us to adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
We have a motion by Mrs. Pope, it sounds like we have a second from Mr. Hunt. Mrs. Anderson, oh, wait. Oh, that's not, that's right. All right, Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Pope.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson, aye. Mrs. Pope, aye. Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Hunt, aye. Mr. Jabali.
Aye.
Mr. Jabali, aye. Chair votes aye. We are adjourned at 7:30